Hello and welcome to this premium podcast of the Lotus Eaters. I'm Harry, joined again by my good friend Thomas.
Hello.
And this is the next step in Thomas's punishment for getting into an argument with James Lindsay on Twitter, because I'm here to torture him and you with what exactly are leftists teaching our kids in schools. This is something that, as many could tell, is very important to us because we don't really believe that children should be indoctrinated. And I thought this might be an interesting series that could develop from this, where we look at particular curriculums of particular areas in both America and the UK and parts of Europe. This one that I've got here is based around the Seattle Public Schools curriculum on LGBT issues, because of course they have one of those. And I just, before we go any further, need to say thank you to Chris Barden, who sent these links in. Chris, if you're watching, thank you very much. If you're not, hopefully you tune in at some point else at some other time. So thank you very much again for that. And just to say as well, this is a new format we're trying out, where we're doing these premium podcasts live occasionally, so hopefully this goes all right. Please let us know in the comments below. So to start off with, I think we need to ask ourselves something very important through this whole thing, which is, why do kids need to learn this? Because to be sure, the subjects that we're going to be focusing on are aimed between kindergarten and 5th grade in Seattle. And the Seattle Public Schools, I think, administer about 104 schools throughout the district. So this is what 5 to 10-year-olds throughout that entire area are having to learn about, the poor sods, if I can just be honest about that. But just as a prelim, I found this very interesting when I found it seems that Seattle schools don't seem particularly interested in academic achievement in the first place, because during the lockdown period where everyone was learning from home, Seattle schools decided to change grades between only A or incomplete, which people still decided to complain about as being inequitable to somebody, where a school board voted that high school students who make concerted effort to take part in distance learning should all get A grades. So just there's your participation medal for showing up.
So the trying that matters, not the actual content of the work.
Yes. And those who didn't put enough effort in or didn't take part at all are supposed to get grades of incomplete. So it's not even that you've failed, it's just that you've not completed the course, and I think you need to make it very clear.
So you get an incomplete certificate for
Yes, you just didn't show up. It's not. You didn't even need to do anything to get a grade of an A other than show up. And then they have to take the opportunity to make up the work in summer or fall. So once again, it's pass or fail, no in between. This on its own makes me question Seattle's approach to education and grading. And as mentioned, the Seattle Special Education, PTSA, questioned whether blanket A grades may disadvantage some students with disabilities. Not that it might, create issues where the people who are at the very top of their game are getting the exact same grades as those who literally just show up. No, we need to think about the disabled people, because these things with intersectionals are never enough. But let's take a look at the LGBTQ programs that are part of the Seattle Public Schools. So they say here, we are proud to have gender and sexuality alliances, aka gay straight alliances, GSA groups, at almost all high schools and in many middle schools. So for those unaware, we covered it a while back. In states like California, these sorts of groups have been found to be hotbeds of teachers grooming students. I forget their name, but there was 2 teachers in a Californian high school who were found to be using these as basically fronts to try and groom certain students into believing that they were trans, where they would, go over the loudspeaker announcements and say, congratulations to blah, 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 for coming out as a girl, all that sort of really bad stuff is very, very bad. And they say, in response to student needs, the district introduced classroom materials that focus on age-appropriate concepts of gender and gender identity. The K through 5 gender book kits are available to Seattle's K through 5 teachers. So apparently they don't understand that myself, yourself, and many of you watching would consider that gender and gender identity as concepts alone, one, don't really make much sense because they try and disconnect gender from biological sex, which I think we all know deep down is nonsense. But also, these concepts are not appropriate for anybody through K through 5, which, as far as I'm aware, in America means 5 to 10-year-olds.
No, it's literally the last thing you would be thinking about as a 5 to 10-year-old. As a matter of fact, the very idea of having a sexual orientation, or at least how I remember it as a child, was utterly repulsive. I was like, ugh, girls, no.
Yeah, you don't want to be near girls.
No.
They're weird. They're kind of creepy, to be perfectly honest, when you're that young.
Yeah.
But the books and lessons were developed by a district-led task force, community members, parents and educators in response to the state's adoption of new health education standards. These standards introduce at the elementary school level concepts such as gender, gender roles, gender expression, and gender identity. And I will say, I do think this is also a trick, not just to try and brainwash the children, but to trick the parents as well. Because when parents who don't know any better hear that these sorts of things are now being taught in the schools from authoritative sources, those who are a bit too agreeable might just assume they've missed some new developments in science or sociology or education in general and just go along with it.
And it's very easy to gloss over the details, isn't it? When you utter phrases like, oh, trans rights are human rights, some kids are trans, or the more common, some people are trans, because you don't actually have to engage in the content of the changes they're proposing to make.
Yes, all of these ideas appeal to very base level compassion that people feel. And I can understand why people feel compassion. You don't want to think that your actions are going to cause somebody to go out and kill themselves, as is often the most common threat from the trans lobby. But we need to recognize that these, for the most part, are very empty threats. And I think we are doing a very good job, especially in Florida, of just recognizing that and pushing through.
Yes.
Because no longer can these people say this isn't happening in schools like they were with CRT, because it absolutely is happening in schools. And here, if you move along to the next slide, here we go, move down. So K5 gender lessons and videos, all of the materials and all of the resources are available online. So in your local area, you might want to double check where local school districts, where you are, whether they have this sort of stuff going on. And if you do, and they do, you need to make the school aware that you are not happy about this, because as we'll go through, we'll be able to see very, very clearly that this is all brainwashing. There is no education going on. They're not even using these sorts of subjects as a through line to try and get to something about biology. For instance, they disconnect those subjects completely.
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.